Gracias. Buenos días, señores y señores. Antes de hablar en inglés, me gustaría agradecer a los organizadores, entonces el FAMSI y la Universidad Pablo de Olavide de aquí, y todos los amigos que han trabajado para organizar esta conferencia hoy. Y ahora voy a seguir en inglés. So we are going to present this context report that is not an internal report just for our projects. So all the people that are not internal to the project, I think it's extremely interested to talk about this dynamics on migration, human rights, and development, and we will follow up seminar intervention. So just a few words on how we work on this project. We start at the very beginning of this year, organizing first of all the theoretical part, so on this concept, how this concept, human rights, development, and migration are tied together. That's a big question because many times we are talking of this concept separately, and that's easier. But to link them together is extremely hard. It's a big challenge. So we start working on these concepts, and then we move on more practical part. So discussing in every country of this project, conducting field research, interviewing people from local authorities, from migrants organizations, from NGOs, so from different angles. And some friends are here. I'm very glad I was here in Seville and Malaga in June, and I conducted some interview, and I'm glad to see some friends here. So I will start now presenting the theoretical part with some example from the countries, and then I will hand over to Professor Gozzi. As you know, the relationship between migration and development is rich, multi-phase, and complex. Without the coherence of these two sectors, the positive effect may be blocked, or at least weakened. And on this coherence, I will be back many times. In the last decade, the migration-development nexus was broadly analyzed both among academics and practitioners. Several international organizations, NGOs, and local authorities are trying to get it into practice because they do believe that it could play an essential role in fostering development, alleviating poverty, and create new opportunities for migrants. However, the link among development, migration, and human rights is more in declaration than in practice. A demonstration is that the practitioners of these three fields are almost always separated and occasionally working together. Furthermore, the relationship between development and human rights is often an implicit discourse, and these two fields are separate language and spheres of work. Moreover, even at the theoretical and academic level, the engagement of co-development is crowded of experts on migration, but often with few experts with a background in development. The risk is that co-development remains a concept with few occasional applications. A fundamental question is therefore whether co-development principle can find a real application in policies. The AMITIE project is a small step in order to fill this gap. The partners are already from different backgrounds: local authorities, civil society organizations, the university, and our plan is to share good practices and lessons learned with policymakers on different levels. So this context report is divided in two main parts, in two blocks. The first one is analyzing the relationship among development, migration, and human rights, and the second part is dedicated to analyze the countries and cities of this project. So the aim of the second part is to learn from each other. That's extremely important. Risk and potentialities are present in each of our country and cities. Let me make some examples from this second part of the report. Local authorities, for instance, are not playing the same role on development and migration in each country. Here in Spain, for instance, they are working quite a lot on these issues. But in other countries, like in Romania, for instance, migration is a policy only in charge of national authorities. So we all probably have a lot to learn from some Spanish regions and cities, even if we know that things may change, as we heard before. But still, we have to learn how here the municipalities are working on co-development. Despite it's not obviously possible to apply the same model everywhere, we should consider how local authority may be closer to the people, especially migrants, and ready to hear their needs. A second example is on citizenship and how to obtain citizenship that is not considered in the same way in every country, in every partner. So, even in Italy, the rights of immigrants are still very limited. But dual citizenship is a solution for immigrants that want to acquire rights in the new country, but for many reasons, they still consider themselves as part of the country of origin. And this may be an inspiring model for other country projects. A third example is on Brazil. We hear before how Brazil is changing recently, how the economy is growing up. And on this side, can we consider Brazil a developed country or a developing country? This is a big challenge because we usually split the word in two parts, developed and developing. But Brazil challenges this approach, saying we want South-South cooperation, we want equal cooperation, and probably we have a lot to learn in this direction. Fourthly, and finally, from the news, I'd like to mention that in Italy, usually at the national level, policies on migration and development are quite divided, are quite split. But with the new government, maybe you heard that Berlusconi is over, there is a new minister called Minister of International Cooperation and Integration. So this guy, Andrea Ricciardi, is working on international cooperation and integration. So at least in theory, he's working on both this side, and extremely relevant for our project. So let me move now on the first part of the research on the origin of the concept of co-development. The debate of migration and development moved from optimism in the 50s and the 60s to pessimism in this regard since the 70s, and toward a more optimistic approach in the last decade. In the post-war period of rebuilding and economic growth, migration from countries on the European periphery was seen as a process that benefited both regional and destination countries, as Samina here well outlined. Early in the 70s, with the economic downturn and increasing unemployment, the view on migration as a mechanism provoking brain drain grew, as well as the dependency of immigration region and country of migrant and migrant remittances. In the last decade, however, the scientific community is not considering only the economic dimension, but has been developing a broad and cross-disciplinary consensus on the direct link generally existing between capitalist development and human mobility, especially international migration. More recently, economists have developed a paradigm often labeled migration hump. According to this theory, an inverted U-shaped curve exists between the level of country per capita income and international migration. That means that developing countries with low or high per capita GDP produce smaller share of international migrants than do middle-income developing countries. What does it mean? I don't know if you get the point, but it's like a U. So extremely poor and extremely rich countries are not involved by massive migration. It's middle-income developing countries that are strongly interested by migration. Concerning the European Union, it was only since the mid-90s that an increasing awareness of these practical limits and shortcomings of an unilateral approach to migration control pushed European states and institutions to set up specific policies on the migration development nexus. In this direction emerged a technocratic version of the so-called root causes approach. I don't know if you never heard about the root causes approach. What does it mean? It means that if we eradicate poverty, if we, with development projects, we limit poverty, we will have less migrants here. But that's the opposite of what I said before, because extremely poor country, if they are growing up economically, well, the migrants will rise up as well, okay? Because middle-income developing countries have more immigrants than extremely poor countries. This is a very important concept. So this approach of root causes idea is not working. A more comprehensive understanding of migration issues started 5-6 years ago at the European level with the document of the Commission highlighting some practical measures based on, for instance, some important concepts like circular migration. We heard from Nay here the importance of circular migration, or brain drain, the first time that this idea of brain drain was used. The EU also values the significance of South-South migration flows, toward which it has expressed its support by assigning partners countries through migration management and capacity building initiatives. Let us now move to current practice and visions. And let's start from some characteristics of co-development. I'm just outlining some ideas. First of all, migrating community plays the main role both in the country of origin and of the reception. So they are the main actors. Secondly, it's very important to have time stability and continuity of the initiative of co-development between the communities linked. So not just the short projects and moving on. It's a dialogue, a process between